Good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is where you are. Thank you so much for coming today, especially if you've spent a full day in the classroom. We very much appreciate you taking some time to be with us here today and talk a little bit about teaching multiple levels of English learners in a Gen Ed classroom. My name is Ava Vieira Osmond. I'm the Director of Marketing at Listenwise, and I'm very excited to bring you a webinar today where we have two Texas-based educators who are going to share their tips for how to teach multiple levels of English learners in a Gen Ed classroom using Listenwise. And we hope that today you are going to leave with some practical tips, some creative lesson plan ideas, and some interactive activities that you can use with Listenwise to address a diverse classroom of learners. And if we have any administrators here today, please let us know. You're going to hear how Listenwise can be an efficient and effective tool for ensuring that English learners at every level get access to rigorous, accessible material in both Gen Ed and ELD classrooms. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Melissa Rincon and we have Megan Berry. So welcome, ladies. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little something about yourselves if you'd like, so we can get to know you.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on with you today. I am principal of Meacham Middle School, and I have been a principal at two previous campuses and an educator for 16 years. I'm just joining Meacham as of the Friday before spring break. I've been subbing here since January and was permanently named as the principal a week ago Friday. So I'm super excited to dig into this work. We've been doing it a little bit already, but I thought the perspective of being a school leader coming into a new campus would be helpful because we've all been in flux the past few years. So I'm excited to share some knowledge and with you today. And I want to introduce our wonderful teacher, Miss Megan Berry.
Hi, I'm Megan Berry. I have been a teacher this is my 10th year. I started in elementary, and this is actually my second year in middle. All of my experience has been with EB students, majority of EB students. So my classroom has a lot of emergent bilingual students, which I enjoy using different tools and techniques to help them grow in both their languages.
Fabulous. And if there's one thing that we know from working with educators who work with English learners, there are a ton of different terms out there. So we are going to be talking a little bit later about what they all mean. They mean one thing in Texas, they might mean one thing somewhere else. Oh, hello from Ecuador. How exciting. Yes, please, if you are just joining us, please type in the chat where you are joining us from and the students that you serve, and we would love to make this a little more interactive. So thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And now we can move on to today's agenda. So just so that everybody kind of knows what we have planned for today, we're going to talk a little bit about Listenwise as a product. Some of you might be familiar with Listenwise, may already be super users. Some of you are probably, maybe have never heard of Listenwise before. So we're going to kind of give you a quick overview of what our product is, what it does, how it can serve teachers who work with multiple levels of English learners before we go into how Meacham is using it, how our particular educators that we have here today have used it, and that'll be those practical tips and tricks that you can maybe take with you from today. And then they also have some forward-thinking big ideas for what they want to do with Meacham sort of in the future, how they want to help their English learners at different levels and beyond. So as promised, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Listenwise. So Listenwise is a product that you can use with all different kinds of learners. It's meant to be a fun and engaging way to teach grade level curriculum and language together while developing listening skills. But it's much more than just a listening product, especially what with our ELD lesson library that we've added. And we're continuing to add more and more different kinds of ways to approach the content and scaffolds. We have podcasts, visuals, and videos that provide multiple entry points for students to learn in a meaningful and engaging way. And like I said, our extensive scaffolding, the goal is to improve comprehension without reducing rigor. So here I have some pictures of some of our more recent lessons that you can kind of get a sense of what we cover. The sensory world of animals. We have science, which a lot of people are very excited about, especially with English language learners in California. I know our state testing seems to skew for science for some reason for a lot of those tests. So that's something that our students may not have covered before. So giving them that prior experience with interacting with lessons that have to do with science is super important so they can build that background knowledge. We also have the scientific view of Bigfoot. That's not under science, but it is apparently scientific, but it's an ELA lesson. So fun and kind of exciting thing to sort of share with your students to make something a little bit different in the classroom. On basketball and writing, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just an example of just sort of the variety that we have at Listenwise. So we also do current events, we have debate stories, we have weird news, and all those are published regularly. All of our lessons are fairly short, so they're all, I would say majority are under 5 minutes, some are even under 30 seconds, like our weird news ones. So there's something that can kind of fit in any nook and cranny of your day, I would say. Oops. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the ELD lesson library since we are going to be talking about English learners today. Our ELD lesson library is a specific part of Listenwise where it's designed for English language proficiency levels 1 through 3. So as we talked about earlier, everybody kind of calls things something different, but hopefully this is something that approaches titles or recognition that you might use in your school or district for these different English language levels. I have a little graphic over here to show you an example of some of the content that's in there. And what makes these lessons really special is that they all include, just like our regular lessons, a great visual, and we're going to have an example to show you later of what that looks like, and also videos. So sometimes it's 1 video, 2 videos, 3 videos, all at different sort of levels of English language proficiency that you can use to build that background knowledge for your students before you dive into the lesson. So we are rapidly growing our ELD lesson library. So we have the cute little graphic over in the corner. So we're always adding to it. We're always trying to really flesh out our collection. So we have something that serves everyone. And we do, we want to hear from you too. So if you're a Listenwise user and there's something that you think we're missing that you'd love a lesson about X, Y, or Z, we also very much welcome the feedback. We'd love to hear from you about what you want to see. So here's a little preview of what you'll see in the ELD lesson library lessons themselves. So for emergent multilinguals, we have our ELD lesson library. It pairs, as I mentioned, podcast and video for multimodal instruction. The ELD lesson materials are available in English and Spanish. We hope to eventually expand that to other languages. And they are specifically designed for students with a lower English proficiency. And as students progress in their English language proficiency, teachers can choose lessons from some of our gen ed lessons as well. So we're kind of seeing this as a bridge to our other lessons that you can kind of go through and see what ELP levels they're at and make sure that they work for your students. And you can also, as you can see here in the graphic, search for them for your lessons based on the ELP levels, so that should hopefully make it as easy as possible to find a right lesson that's the right fit for your students. And these are some of my favorite aspects, and I think some of our teachers' favorite aspects of Listenwise. Our favorite features are the podcast transcript and supports. So all of our podcasts, all of our lessons include a podcast transcript with them that kind of, some of my colleagues call it karaoke. The little words sort of light up in different colors as you go, so you can track and follow along with each different word. You can slow down the rate of speech so that it's more comprehensible. And we also have a text help toolbar that's part of our lessons where you're able to click on a word and you're able to get translations in 15+ different languages for those words. So they will have, sometimes it'll speak it to you, sometimes it'll just show you the written translation, and sometimes it'll even show you a cute little icon that's meant to be like a picture of what the word is. So there's 3 different sort of ways to approach this word that your students may not know. And a little bit about our ELD supports on all lessons. So here's an example of the two different types of lessons that we have right now. Our ELD lesson library, which is for ELP levels 1 through 3, and our general education lessons, which are ELP levels 4 through 6. And they're the same audio stories, same types of audio stories as you'd find in our Gen Ed lessons. The difference is just that there's more scaffolding to increase accessibility for students at lower levels of English language proficiency. But we also make sure that you can turn on or off these supports on our ELD lessons so that we're not over scaffolding. So we know that we don't want to do that. And a pro tip that a lot of people don't realize is that if you have an example like we have here, where it's the same lesson, but with different scaffolds for ELD versus Gen Ed, at the bottom of the lesson, you're going to find a little like anchor link shape thing. And you'll be able to just hover over that, click on that, and it'll take you back and forth between the two different kinds of lessons. So if you want to say, oh, I want some of my students, so we're talking about differentiating for multiple levels today, some of my students are ready for the Gen Ed version. So you can click that little anchor icon, or these students, I want them to have the ELD version. You can also click that icon and you can just go back and forth really easily. And we're going to talk a little bit about this later as well, more in depth, but I just wanted to share with you our ELD Teacher's Guide. So this comes with our ELD lessons, and it includes a lot of different kinds of materials that you can use to support your students before, during, and after instruction. So I won't read through all of these, but this is part of our instructional framework for ELD, and it's meant to support purposeful listening. And we have strategies, like I said, for before, during, and after listening to audio stories. So now that you have the context of what is Listenwise, what do we do, what do we offer, how would you practically use that in a classroom, and what are the ways that teachers and administrators might see this as a useful tool for differentiating for different levels of English language learners? So I'm going to turn it over to our guests today to talk a little bit about their school, their particular students, what sort of challenges they face, and what they see are some ways that Listenwise has helped.
I'll jump in and share a little bit. We wanted you to get to meet Meacham Middle School and know a little bit about our students and a little bit about our data before we dive into how Listenwise can help us. As you can see from the pie chart on the left of your screen, our emergent bilingual population is 69.4%. That includes both newcomers, and the majority of our EB population are long-term emergent bilinguals, meaning that they've been in U.S. schools for a long time, but have not gained language proficiency to be exited out of the program, meaning that they are scoring low in either listening, reading, writing, or speaking, and not at that proficient level yet. And so we know that if we are catering to and ensuring best practices for our emergent bilingual population, our school will rise. Looking at our previous performance data, in Texas, our state test measures performance by approaches, meets, and masters. So you will see that of our EB students, 52% scored approaches on last year's STAR test, and this is all tests. We didn't delineate for the purposes of this webinar between math, science, social studies, and English. We just lumped all tests together. And our all students is 53%, which really mirrors that as our EB population goes. So does our regular student pop also. In the meets category, which is scoring on grade level, our EB students are scoring 19% and all students are scoring 22%. And then on masters, are we meeting those students who are really excelling? Our EB students are 2% and all students are 4%. We want to acknowledge we certainly have work to do at Meacham Middle School to raise the bar and get those numbers up for all students. I know that I am not happy with the fact that only 53% of our students are even approaching grade level. That means 47% are not. That means 48% of our EB students are not meeting grade level standard. And that's an area of growth for us. And so we are going into our pockets and looking for all resources that can possibly help us coming from a school that used Listenwise previously, and when I was first introduced to this program, we had a similar population, and we really saw growth and authentic learning and engagement with Listenwise materials. And the platform has become so robust, even since I started using Listenwise at that previous campus, that I'm excited to get to share it with everyone here and introduce it to some of our teachers here who've been playing with it and have having some really good experiences. So y'all don't need to listen to me much more. Let's I want Miss Barry to get to share her experience, just getting introduced to it and sharing what it was like from a student perspective.
Yeah. Do we want to go to the next slide?
Sure, let's go.
Okay. So the first thing that we did was I got the kids set up into Google Classroom and because it can link to your Google Classroom, which I felt was really cool. And so what we did was we did do our Ruby Bridges, and the first thing I set up, it was easy for teachers to set up. And so what I was able to do is set up for the Ruby Bridges quiz and had them do it like in a station when they were finished with their work, or when they were at this station, they got to do like a listening station, and then the comprehension of the listening. The kids really, really wanted me to tell y'all that that they enjoyed being able to hear from Ruby Bridges herself, that was impactful for them, because they knew at that moment that this was a true situation, because it's so far-fetched for them. It was the Ruby Bridges quiz. All of my students took from all different levels, just to see, because I asked them, I said, I want y'all to tell me, what do y'all think? What do y'all think? Do you think that this is good? Tell me the good and the bad. And it was really difficult for them to find anything that they didn't like about it. Even the picture in Ruby Bridges was a big thing for them. We discussed the picture, and on our state test for emergent bilinguals or ESL students, they do have to take one where they look at a picture and they have to describe it. And so that was what we did, whole group afterwards, kind of our conclusion for Ruby Bridges. But we did other stuff too.
Yeah,
Do we
well, I just wanted to pause real quick on this because I mean, I love to hear your students' perspective on that first person narrative. That first person audio is really one of the strengths of Listenwise and of audio in general, is that when we see something, that's very powerful. But when we really hear someone's lived experience from them, those are just incredibly rich resources and very powerful. And I think our students are really moved by that and connect with it, and it feels more real and authentic. And this photo, I kind of blew it up as much as I could while also making space for everything, because this is the photo that I feel like is particularly rich to work with students for before listening as well. And you can even sort of revisit it after listening. I come to sort of this space from a museum education background, and there's a technique called visual thinking strategies that I really love and used a lot when talking about art with young students. And I feel like this photo in and of itself, that could be a whole lesson, is without knowing anything about what you're going to listen to, what do you see? What do you notice? What are your questions? And then revisiting it afterwards, just could be such a rich part of this experience for your students. So I I think that that's fantastic. And I wanted to also pull this out. You mentioned the sample quiz, and I just pulled out a visual for you here so you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, and then so like when we were looking at the quiz questions, they are aligned to our state standards, which I think are pretty aligned to other state standards. So that was a big thing for me, because I wasn't expecting that from the program. I'm sorry, but I wasn't expecting that. And then when I saw it, I was like, yes, yes, this is amazing. So it really was very helpful to see that this is what they're going to experience when they take, in Texas, we call it TELPAS, when they take the English language proficiency test, and when they take our state standard test, they're going to see these types of questions. So I felt like that was impactful for my students in the long run.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And just to mention, I'm glad we exceeded your expectations. So that's always a good place to be, first of all. I also just wanted to call out also here that when students are listening to the podcast, they can also read along with the transcript.
Yes.
They can slow those audio speeds, and we do have Spanish translations with our ELD lessons as well. So up at the top, you'll be able to see if you want to translate this, and it translates the whole thing into English or Spanish. Again, we're working on additional languages, but for right now, this is what we have. So I'll move along to the next section. Let's talk about ghosts.
All right. So this one was actually probably my favorite to watch happen in my classroom, because you guys, we do this career to also get the delight of watching children grow. And our student population is very shy, and they don't like to talk very much. And as a teacher, you have to like really pull it out of them sometimes. We read this story, and there is a discussion question in it. And it's like, well, do you believe in ghosts? And we did this just to see what the kids would say. And it was like being around every single one of my groups. It was like being around a little campfire. They were telling ghost stories. It was perfect. I was like, oh my goodness, they're talking, they're communicating. And even the accountable talk where they were using, and what else happened, like they were interested. And to find topics like that to pull from them is really really beneficial in the classroom.
Yes, getting students to talk is definitely number one thing that we hear from teachers. They want their students to talk more. And I think that there isn't really a better way to get students to talking than to talk about things that are somewhat universal experiences, like thinking about ghosts. There are cultural differences in the ways that we think about ghosts, but that's also fascinating. So that's a great topic of conversation as well. And yes, this idea that it's kind of like a little mini campfires. I like that description.
Yes.
And this weird news story, I just want to point out, is less than 30 seconds long. So I listened to it again today just to refresh my memory, but it's super short. So there isn't a lot of like really concentrated listening and decoding that needs to happen in order to access this story. And actually, the narrator kind of sets it up for us where they mention this study and then they say, well, this is what I think about it. So they're kind of giving their personal opinion as the reporter on the story. That kind of sets up this idea of, well, what do you think and how do you feel about it? And I like that idea that students are then asking follow-up questions like, well, tell me more about this. I want to know about the ghost you saw, or why don't you feel that way, or something like that. I love that. And then I'll share here, this is the sample teacher resources. So this goes with that lesson. If you click over to the assignment resources, you can see we've already tried to do some of that heavy lifting for you and come up with listening comprehension questions. So making sure that we're checking back in. These are things you can ask while you're listening to the story or after the story. And then those discussion themes. So this is perfect for our campfire. What are some examples of paranormal activities that you've heard of or experienced? And you can change the language on that slightly to meet your students' needs. But yeah, it's our weird news stories. We have one about a green puppy that was born that we hear people really found fascinating. We have a lot around Halloween about candy. Candy always gets people talking. Pizza, just trying to find things that feel like you want to have a conversation about them. So that's a great way to get that started. And here we go. Speaking of weird news.
So another way that we use this is in their sustained silent reading time. They were allowed to, at that station, they were allowed to pick. And I think that student choice is a big part of getting them to read what they want to read. And if I can develop a love for reading, especially at a middle school level, my job is golden. So to get them to do the weird news, they were fascinated with the green puppy. They were big with the green puppy as well, and other articles too. And then I noticed as they were leaving my classroom, they were talking about the and it left my classroom. I watched it flow out into the hallway. And so I was like, wow, okay, y'all got me. So it also had current events, and it was something that I could tie to the lesson. So if I wanted to assign something that was kind of talking about what was going on, there was a lot, and then there was a lot of cultural stuff that would benefit my classroom culture as well. Even, there was stuff on bullying, like what you need for classroom culture, but even to show the diversity of the world around them. So I let them explore it, and they did a great job of exploring. So
I love to hear that. Yeah. So social emotional learning is definitely another strength, I think, of audio. As we were saying, it connects you to the reality of things that have happened in the past and sort of validates that these things are real, but it also connects to us emotionally when we hear someone's firsthand account and story. We have a story with Henry Winkler, actor from Happy Days, The Fonz, and from Barry, I believe. And he's sharing about his experience growing up being dyslexic without realizing that he was dyslexic until he was an adult. And it's a very emotional thing to hear this man who is, as old enough to be probably your student's great grandpa, talking about how he felt as a kid, and it feels just as fresh to him today as it did back then. So finding those connections is great. And I do just want to give a quick plug for we're always coming up with new sources for our materials. So we sort of source our podcast lessons from all over the place. And a new source that we've just brought on board is Rebel Girls. So some of you might be familiar with Good Night Rebel Girls. It's a book that came out a while ago. As it sounds like, they focus on telling the story of amazing, empowering women and young girls from throughout history and around the world. And they also have a podcast called Rebel Girls Podcast. And we are having some of those lessons now on our platform. And there's some really cool stories out there that I think also kind of help with that classroom culture part that come from the Rebel Girls Podcast. So those are brand new ones that are coming out. So if you are here today, you officially have your tip of what you can check out after this. Oop, there we go.
okay. And like I said before, my students were able to log in through Google Classroom, and it also linked the two. It linked, your computer technology difficulty. Hold on,
Oh,
just
you're looking good to me.
We just lost the screen.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
The link they linked. So likewise, and Google Classroom linked together for me. I hope that it does it for everybody else too, because it was great. So I could assign it on Google Classroom. And then my students set it up on their computers as well. Listenwise can be graded if you want to take grades on that. And Listenwise was the quizzes were to our state standards and to our high level state testing as well.
Great. And that reminds me, you were talking about the state standards and testing. So when you sign up for your Listenwise subscription, you'll include information like what state you're in. And if you include that information, automatically the state standards for your particular state will show up. So if you're a WIDA state, we have WIDA state standards. If you're in Texas, we have Texas state standards, California, and so on. And we are trying to develop more standards alignment, but hopefully if you're from somewhere not in the United States, you're able to find something that pretty easily matches on to what your standards are. There is some universality there. So it's already ready, taken care of for you. You've already got your standards alignment there. And then let's go to big ideas moving forward for Meacham.
Well, we, I kind of Trojan horse Listenwise as an experiment just to see if teachers and students would like it here. And Miss Barry's experience and feedback has been really helpful. As a school leader looking how to use this product, given all the options we have. I really love that we mentioned earlier that the lessons are bite-sized and manageable. So it can be embedded within any part of the lesson. You could use a weird news clip as part of the bell ringer or do now, or if you're studying, scientific genome mutations, you could do the story about the green puppy and how that happened and really get some high energy engaging buy-in at any point in the lesson. It could be used during a we do or you do part. You can work in teams or independently, or it could be used to close a lesson. Have we thought about this? Any of those discussion questions and support. I think it's really helpful for teachers not to have to go source all the material. They can quickly link in the lesson plan. I'm going to do, for the we do portion of the lesson, I'm going to do this topic from Listenwise, and we could quickly know what that is. I think that it saves time, and it's also energetic and engaging and helps students connect to the material. I also love as a school leader, and we have a lot of experienced teachers, and also coming out of the pandemic, we have a lot of teachers who really haven't had a lot of experience and are really questioning, do I even want to stay a teacher? And so when we talk to teachers at various developmental levels, bringing up small group is almost like a dirty word right now as a school leader. So having this resource to be able to say, well, you could do a Listenwise lesson that they could rotate through, and then being able to have an experienced teacher who can model it for others to see in action is just very exciting to me. The teachers aren't having to design the station themselves and come up with 4 separate lessons. This one is really ready to go. And then knowing that it's standard aligned and there's checks for understanding built in, just really warms my teacher heart. And I know that this would be a resource for me if I were still in the classroom. It could also be used for intervention, not just independent station, but using that to really prompt and probe students who are struggling and really need to work on either vocabulary or a basic listening piece. And then, we're really thinking about independent practice. In Texas, we have to do high impact tutorials with high qualified instructional materials. And we want to make sure that the product we're providing to students is a good, engaging experience, not just a plug and play test prep option. And so I see I see that there could be room to explore what that looks like using Listenwise for some of our independent tutorial time, either extension activities for our students who have completed everything, or also for some of our students who need additional help and are staying in Texas, making up attendance recovery hours, or getting some of those instructional high impact tutoring hours, getting this embedded as a piece of their plan. I could see being really helpful for both teachers and students alike and getting that engagement.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that the flexibility of Listenwise is sort of what you're describing. I think is something that is a really important part of making sure that we can meet not just every student where they are, but every teacher where they are, and every sort of classroom situation where it is. One of the things we've done a webinar in the past, and if you want to, you can check it out on our YouTube channel, about app smashing using Listenwise. And as you're talking, I was thinking, yeah, for some of these students where you need something additional, you can also add in like a speaking element to it, and you can app smash with a speaking app. And I've heard about teachers who use that. We have lots of very creative teachers in our community that have all different kinds of ideas for reaching their students with their students' particular needs and interests. And the key is flexibility. We have something that is done to our instructional standards, and we want to make sure that it's rigorous real world content that people can access in the classroom, but we also need it to work for you. So really, we invite you to let us know, how do you do your app smashing? If that works for you, how are you using it to sort of access specific things for your classroom and your students? And we love to hear all of it, and we want to do more. And speaking of doing more, I have a bit of a sneak peek here, which is that we're very excited that for Back to School 2024, we are going to be launching our first new product since we launched ourselves, I guess is the way to say it. And it's going to be called Lingo Lift. It is called Lingo Lift. And Lingo Lift is going to be a product that is designed for newcomers to beginning level ELLs in grades 2 through 12. And the goal is to build that foundational social language that students need to be successful academically across language and literacy domains like reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So this is going to have a watch, learn, speak protocol that will make it so that students are able to practice all 4 of those domains every single day, potentially, while using LingoLift. And we'll be sharing around the time of launch how LingoLift can pair really nicely with Listenwise so that now you can actually meet every single level of students with less work on your end to try to take our ELD lessons and scaffold them appropriately for your newcomers, your EBs, or different groups like that. So very exciting thing that we're all looking forward to. More to come on that. But if you're interested in learning more right now, you can always email us, reach out, and we'll be happy to talk to you more about that and how that could be used at your school, district, or classroom. So very, very excited to have new content out there to serve our newcomers, and excited to engage with newcomer teachers on that as well. So we are almost at the end of our time today. I would like to thank you all for coming. Those of us who attended live. If you're watching a replay, thank you for watching. Thank you to our teachers and admin who were here today to speak about their experiences. It's been fantastic to hear from you. And if anybody has any questions, we are going to hang out a little bit and we'd love to hear questions you have, maybe some of your favorite lessons that you've used with your students in the past, some observations that you've had based off of things that we've shared during this chat, but we'll kind of hang out here a little bit. And thank you again. And we hope that you try out Listenwise and start your free trial if you haven't before.